we're going to go to the inside workings of the cell. Because when you think about it, and the inside workings of the cell, you begin to understand how the body works. And to know how the body heals, it's important to know how it works. And I don't believe it's rocket science. I don't believe that we have to study medicine to know how the body works. But I do think it's a good idea that every home has an anatomy and physiology book. And a nurse's anatomy and physiology book, or you might even find a year 11 or year 12 anatomy and physiology book, might be easier to understand. I'm saying this because that's what I need to understand it. And when you understand how the body works, you are more in a position to know how to treat it and what to do to it. So we're going inside the cell. And I also found it very interesting that Darwin said that his theory of evolution rested on what we would know about the inside workings of the cell. In other words, his theory is basically refuted. The deeper they go into the human body, the deeper they go into the cell, the more amazing it is. And the deeper you go in, the more you see the signature of God. And right inside the cell is the DNA. And the DNA is the genetic code that determines the colour of our eyes, the colour of our hair, the colour of our skin, our height. When I was in Tennessee, it was about 8 years ago now, and I flew in, and I don't usually know who's going to pick me up. I usually just stand there and look around, and whoever starts smiling at me, it's usually them. And there was a couple in rocking chairs. I've never seen rocking chairs in airports before. And the man stood up. He was smiling and he just kept going. He was 6'10". Whoa, was he tall. And then later that day I met his son, who was 6'6". So how come his son was 6'6" and he was 6'10"? Because this boy's mother was 5'4". And that's what we are. We are a combination of genes from our mother. We've got 26 chromosomes from our mother, 26 from our father. And this DNA that I'm drawing here, you may have seen it drawn a few times, but it was in 1953 it made headlines in the newspaper that Secret of Life had been discovered. Watson and Crick's, two scientists, had been able to unravel the DNA. Even though it is coiled up tight in the nucleus, it can be pulled out even 2 meters long. We have 100 trillion cells in the body, and 75 trillion of the cells are as I'm drawing here. So the other 25 trillion are the red blood cells. And the red blood cells don't have a nucleus, they don't have DNA. The red blood cells are made in the bone marrow. We looked at that, touched on it last night when we looked at the immune system. So it's the genetic code that determines us. And there's a huge amount of information in this DNA. If you were to put all the information into paperback books and put them on top of one another, it would go to the moon and back a few times. Apparently, I can hardly get my mind around that information. And the psalmist said in Psalm 139, verse 14, I will praise you fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. The next verse says, thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. So my substance, what I'm made of, was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Isn't that interesting? I had 6 babies. I didn't know what was going on in there. I couldn't see. But this psalmist says that God's eyes did see my substance that was being curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were being fashioned, when as yet there were none of them. It's Old English, but isn't that interesting? In thy book, in God's book, is this God's book? Like a book. Were all my members written? It was right in my DNA that determined that I'm only 5'1.25". The quarter's important. It also showed that my 3 sons aren't going to be 6 foot. Now, they are taller than me. I think they're about 5'9", but they'll never be 6 foot because look at the size of their mother. And we do it with each other, don't we? We see our nieces, our nephews, our children, our grandchildren. We got the mother's nose, but she's got the mother's eyes, and it's a fascinating thing. But I found it astonishing that this is written in the Bible. It says, thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. We are all born today with an imperfection in the DNA, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were being fashioned, when as yet there were none of them. So this little baby is being fashioned here when we can't even see that baby. And when that baby's born, don't we quickly look at it? Is it a boy or a girl? No, I didn't have scans. A scan's good. Why would you have a scan? And they still don't know the effect on the baby when they have a scan. And apparently it's routine today that you have to have one every month. Is that right? You don't. Got that? You don't. Now, my daughter had one because at 35 weeks, she was extremely large. And the midwife said, I think it's a good idea to have a scan because you are just too big. Well, there were 2 babies in there. But they just wanted to check whether there's anything else. I do understand that. But I just wanted to point out that there's actually not necessary a need to have a scan every month. Well, why have a scan? So when my babies was born, it was quick. Is it a boy or is it a girl? Oh, look at the hair, look, and how exciting to suddenly see that when the baby's born. But it's all determined in God's book in this DNA. When Watson and Crooks had discovered the DNA, been able to pull it out, the reason why the headline said secret of life has been discovered is because they thought when they were able to unravel the DNA, they could make a few adjustments here and there and fix everyone. Well, are we all fixed? No, we're not all fixed. But a question arose that they could not answer because they believe in evolution. Who put the information there? What came first, the chicken or the egg? The Bible says that we were created in the image of God. What an incredible honour, right down to the very DNA. One writer said that he claimed that parents are the genetic engineers of their children, because what we do, our lifestyle habits, what we take in, influences actually the DNA we're giving to the next generation. My husband was born in 1957. When his mother was pregnant with him, she was offered the drug thalidomide because she had morning sickness. You've heard of the drug thalidomide? Women took the drug thalidomide because they put too much trust in the princes. I'm not against doctors. I think most doctors are ethical, but I think they put too much trust in the princes in the pharmaceutical company because they are told this is a great new drug. It'll stop the woman's morning sickness. We had a midwife attend our program. She was in her 80s and she'd worked in Germany when she was young. She said, I delivered the first thalidomide baby. No arms. Yeah. That drug had interfered with the DNA, the development of that baby. finally, did you hear what I said? Finally, after several years, it was. That's why I say, if a woman's got morning sickness, maybe she needs magnesium. Maybe she needs to sip on ginger tea. Maybe she needs to see a chiropractor. Some ladies have said that help, but I'm sure most ladies would happily endure their nausea rather than have had that happen to their babies. So what's happening today is we are all born with a slightly imperfect DNA. But the good news is that even though genetics loads the gun, it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. We are all born with loaded guns. So my mother died at 51, a cripple in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis. I've got the loaded gun. But you probably notice I'm way past 51. I'm not a cripple in a wheelchair and I'm still alive. That's because genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And when I broke my arm a year ago, when I got it out of plaster, my thumb just couldn't move it properly. And I said, does the x-ray show something in that joint there? And I remembered it's actually been sore for about a year. He said, oh, I've got some rheumatoid arthritis in there. Sorry, osteoarthritis. And I thought, and some would say, how come you could have it? Well, this is pretty good. My mother was a cripple and that's all I've got. So I started putting castor oil on it every single night for 6 weeks. I have absolutely no pain there now. Absolutely no indication that there's a problem there. Genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. This is an area of research today called epigenetics. The effect of our lifestyle on our genes, the effect of what we eat on our genes, the effect of what we take into our bodies in our genes, the effect of how we think on our genes. In fact, a couple of 100 years ago, a lot of wealthy women would have wet nurses to breastfeed their babies. And it was said that you must get a wet nurse that is peaceful and calm, because if she's stressed and angry, that can affect the milk going through to the baby. Isn't that interesting? I think more and more things like that are being acknowledged today, and we're going to look at that aspect, the mental aspect, tomorrow night. So what I'd like to look at is, what is that DNA made up of? It's made up of the food we eat. Polysaccharides makes up a part. What are polysaccharides? Poly means many, saccharides means sugars. And basically everything we eat is made up of polysaccharides. What also plays a role, especially for the crossword, amino acids. And amino acids is a breakdown of the food that we eat, especially our protein. But what glues everything together is minerals. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. And Hippocrates was 400 years BC. He didn't know what I've just told you, that our very DNA is made up of the food that we eat. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you an illustration of how the new cell is made, because we are constantly being remade. We've got new eye cells every 2 to 3 days. We've got new cells that line the gastrointestinal tract every 3 to 5 days. We've got a new liver under your right rib every 6 weeks. We've got new bones every 3 months. We've got new skin every month. We're constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula in the DNA. So if that's true, why aren't we better in a few months? Is that a reasonable question? I'd like to say it is a reasonable question. So I'm going to show you how a gastrointestinal tract cell is made. These are the ones that are remade every 3 to 5 days. And by the way, if a gastrointestinal tract is remade every 3 to 5 days, how come someone doesn't heal from irritable bowel Crohn's disease colitis in, let's be generous and say, 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? I think it's a very reasonable question. So let's have a look at how the new gastrointestinal tract cell is made. Inside the DNA of every one of those 25 trillion cells is all the information on how to make a new body, but we only want the information on how to make a new gastrointestinal tract. It's incredible, this body we live in, and the intelligence is in and around and behind it. So only the information that we need for a gastrointestinal tract is released, and a photocopy is made. It's called RNA, because DNA cannot leave the nucleus. So photocopy is made, and the photocopy is taken down to the little factory where the new cell is made. It's called ribosome. Ribosome is the section in the cell where the new cell is made. And the first brick goes down. I'm going to explain it like the building of a brick wall for purposes of illustration. And the first brick that goes down to make the new gastrointestinal tract cell is an amino acid. Maybe it's methionine. And the next brick comes down, maybe it's phenylalanine. Can you see that every amino acid is a slightly different shape and it fits in like the pieces of a jigsaw? Maybe lysine is the next amino acid. Maybe tyrosine is the next amino acid. Can you see how they all just fit in like a jigsaw? And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a beautiful new gastrointestinal tract cell. Well, what about an irritable bowel syndrome cell? How is that made? Well, the photocopy's made, goes down to ribosome where the new cell is made. The first brick goes down, methionine. Now we're ready for phenylalanine, but there's a piece of information missing. The body says, what's supposed to go in there? We haven't got that information. And then a rogue cell comes along, and the rogue cell is a breakdown from environmental poisons. Maybe it's a breakdown from genetically modified foods. It doesn't fit anywhere, so it just pushes its way in. And now we're up to lysine. So lysine comes along. Where does it fit? It actually hasn't got anywhere to fit properly. And then we're ready for tyrosine, but oh no, the person's gastrointestinal tract is not working well. Their hydrochloric acid is low. They're drinking with their meals. They're eating all day long, so they can't break their protein down properly. So it just, because it's not properly broken down, they can't even access it, and they're missing some important amino acids. And there's another rogue cell. And it's always looking for somewhere to poke itself. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new irritable bowel syndrome cell. And that explains the story of a lady I gave the other day. 30 years she's suffered from irritable bowel syndrome. 30 years. She's been on medication, anti-inflammatories, prednisone, and she's still got diarrhea, bleeding and cramping. But the change in the diet, by taking the slippery elm, within 24 hours, the bleeding had stopped. Within 24 hours, the cramping had stopped. Wow, and this lady's in her 70s, and yet she's responding. So what damages the DNA? That's the million-dollar question. Let's make a list of what damages the DNA. The research now is showing that 92% of DNA damage is caused by a mineral deficiency. Dr. Robert Thompson, in his book, The Calcium Lie, he shows the figures. A mineral deficiency? Well, when you realise that minerals literally glue us together, you can see that a mineral deficiency can affect us right down at the cellular, even DNA level. How could we be mineral deficient? Because people are eating kale. Now, 20 years ago, we didn't know what kale was. These are new greens that have merged. Well, we've got to have a look at how it's grown. And Dr. Robert Thompson, in his book, The Calcium Lie, he also shows the figures that 50 years ago, there was twice as many minerals in the soil as there is today. Why? Well, what's happening? I know in Australia where they grow sugarcane, the sugarcane's grown year after year after year after year after year. So that's leaching the soils. And there are some areas that grow the same crops year after year after year. What organic farmer does, if he grows something, before he grows something else, he feeds the soil with compost. Compost has a lot of microorganisms in it, which break down the minerals in the soil and make them available for the roots of the plants. Organic farmers work with the soil. They realise the importance of a rich soil. A rich soil full of nutrients means a rich plant full of nutrients. And the person that eats that plant is going to access those nutrients. When someone's living on fast food, we know that they're going to be mineral deficient. But there are people today who are eating lots of fruits and vegetables, because vegetables is the highest source of minerals. Fruit is high in fibre, low in minerals, but high in sugars, whereas vegetables are high in fibre, high in minerals, low in sugars. In our last lecture, we looked at the importance of vegetables because of their high mineral, low sugar contents to help balance blood sugar levels for diabetes and also help with weight loss. But those vegetables are also vital for the healing of the DNA. And this is why organically grown fruits and vegetables are so important. Let me give you an illustration. One organic tomato will give 9 times the iron as a conventionally grown tomato. So you go in and the organic celery is dark green and looking a bit limp, and the conventionally grown celery is crisp and fat and thick. But one stalk of that little green leafy organic celery will give probably as much nutrients as the whole celery plant of the conventionally grown one. This is why organically grown fruits and vegetables, I believe, are a must as much as possible. So in America, you have Whole Foods, you have Sprouts, you have Trader Joe's. We don't have shops like that in Australia. We have big supermarkets like your Target, Costco's. Actually, we're not as big as Costco. We do have Target, but we also have Coles and Woolies. They're our like supermarket chains. And there will be a small, we don't have Walmart. You call it Walmart. Is that right? Because I asked for Walmart one day and no one knew what I was talking about. I think it's the A, my A's. Anyway. So these supermarkets, sometimes they'll have a little organic section. But in the Costco's, I think they have a small organic section, but in the Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Whole Foods, they have much larger organic sections. And remember, watch where your dollar goes, because the more people that buy organics, the more organics will be available. And still, they don't have to by law whether it's genetically modified on the product. Let's hope Robert Kennedy Jr. can do something there. Yeah, let's hope today. Absolutely. Absolutely. But an organic farmer doesn't use genetically modified seed. So eating organic, you can be pretty sure that it is not been genetically modified. So be careful of the food you're eating. We need veggies every day. We need veggies, and dark green leafy vegetables are the highest source. What I did with my children was I'd serve the salad first, because that's the last thing they want to eat. Isn't that true? And when you only feed them at meal times, they're hungry. So make sure it's crisp. You can even make little faces out of it and have the beautiful dressings. I used to do a tahini, lemon and olive oil. Tahini makes it creamy, crushed garlic, Celtic salt. You can make some delicious dressings. And you know what kids love doing? Dipping. So you have an avocado dip, or you have a hummus dip and have all the raw veggies there. And you don't make a fuss. They're hungry. Okay, the meal's nearly ready, and on the table you have a big platter, have all the raw veggies, and you watch how much they start eating. It's amazing what children will eat when they're hungry. But if there's bread on the table, I can promise you, well, they don't want to eat anything else but bread. And if there's pasta on the table, that's all they want to eat. They're all the same. I know we all think our precious little children are very precious and different to any other child, but yes, they are precious. Of course, they're precious. But when you consider my daughter's son, who's 10 months old and eating ladybugs off the windowsill, you know what I think? What causes a child to become fussy? They're not fussy then, are they? They're eating ladybugs. My children would eat anything, but then again, they'd never had ice cream. They'd never had candies. They didn't have any of that. And when they're hungry, you'll be surprised what they eat. So I come to this conclusion that parents dictate the children. So you just have the stuff you want them to eat on the table. You don't ask them what they want for breakfast, you serve breakfast. They can have a choice. They can have banana or pear on their millet porridge, or they can have organic soy milk or coconut milk. That's where the choice is. They can have a little maple syrup or honey. That's the choice. But you don't ask them what they want to eat. You serve it. Because if you ask them what they want to eat, what are they going to say? Pizza. So this is actually where it starts, because I discovered that my children would eat anything, and that's because they only had healthy food. I used to make dessert twice a week. Children love sweet things, but it was always after they'd eaten all their food. Mineral deficiency, because of the way agriculture is happening today. But something else is causing the mineral deficiency, and that is stimulants. So what do I mean by stimulants? Refined sugar. In fact, one writer said that sugar leaves the body better dressed than when it went in. How did it go into the body? Totally naked. Naked of all the minerals. There's nothing wrong with sugar cane. But if you ever eaten sugar cane, it takes about half an hour to eat 2 inches. It's hard to get into. It's tough, great for the teeth. Full of minerals. And those minerals and that fibre slowly releases the glucose. That's how we should be getting it. But this refined sugar, as I showed you in the last lecture, gets the blood sugar level up very, very high, very, very fast, because it hasn't got minerals and fibre to slow down the release. That refined sugar goes into our body naked, no minerals, and leaves the body better dressed than when it went in. What's it dressed with? Our minerals, our calcium, our magnesium, and the calcium and the magnesium, they calm the acidity of that sugar down, so it's not hurting us so much. So sugar is a big leacher of minerals out of the body, but sugar also damages the DNA. We had a lady attend our program. She was very, very large. She was probably about 250 pounds, but she was only 5 foot tall. And she came with her little 9-year-old daughter, because her little 9-year-old daughter had type 1 diabetes. So we consulted with the little girl and found out what she ate and, her history. And then we consulted with the mother. And the little girl kept saying, "Mum, tell her." And the mother looked a little bit embarrassed. So the little girl finally said, "She eats a whole bag of candy a day." Mother looked a bit embarrassed. That mother doesn't realise that that high sugar she's eating is being stored as fat. She's very large. But what she also doesn't realise is that eating that before she gave birth to her baby caused her to give a compromised pancreatic DNA to her child. Now, not every child had the DNA, the compromised pancreas, but this little girl did. It's like my father had asthma. When I was a little girl, I used to bring the the bulb to him, the rubber bulb with all the glassing tube, and that's very 50s, breathe on it. And then my younger sister, she's the youngest of 5 children, she had asthma. The other 4 did not. And I remember the ambulance taking her to hospital severe. It's interesting with the genes, not everyone will get it. And so with this mother, this very large mother, with her child with diabetes, how can I tell her that her sugar habits have damaged the pancreatic DNA for her child? And that's why one writer said the parents are the genetics engineers of their children. Now, if you've done everything wrong, don't beat yourself up. You didn't know. Now you can start doing everything right. And remember, even though genetics may load the gun, it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. You see, if genetic rules us, that's taken away our choice. And God's government is a government of freedom. Freedom is based on free choice. So refined sugar can damage the pancreatic DNA. Refined sugar leaches the minerals out. Another one is caffeine. So how does caffeine do it? Caffeine disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain. So you can have a couple having maybe 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, and the lady has chocolate, she likes a chocolate, the man has maybe a Dr. Pepper. They can give birth to a baby that has got damaged DNA to the neurotransmitters in the brain. And you know what that means? That child can be prone to attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, autism, even epilepsy because of the parents' caffeine habits. They don't tell you that on the coffee packet, do they? But not only can that affect the DNA, but it also leaches minerals. So caffeine can also leach the calcium and magnesium especially out. Another stimulant is alcohol. Children are being born today with fetal alcohol syndrome to parents that have 2 drinks a week. Dr. Neil Nedley, in his book, Proof Positive, he shows the research there. Now, what can happen is you can have parents that are having 2 drinks a week, and they have 5 children, and one of the children will have the fetal alcohol syndrome. See, it doesn't happen with every child. It's difficult to know how the genes come through. But that's alarming news, especially when many doctors are telling people to have a little bit of red wine at night to put them to sleep. It's like Roundup. Roundup's 99% water, so do we drink Roundup? No, there's a toxic poison in there. So alcohol damages the DNA, and alcohol also leaches the minerals because the body sees it as a poison. Tobacco, we're getting children born today with less alveoli in their lungs, hole in the honeycomb shape that holds their alveoli together in their lungs, to smoking parents. One lady said to me, I stopped smoking when I fell pregnant. I said, well, that's very good news. Because you know what the research is showing, and they've done scans on this. A mother has a cigarette, and at that split second, that baby's deprived of oxygen. And they also show that having a cigarette and then scanning the hand, the blood's not getting into the hand, just with that puff of cigarette. So tobacco can damage the DNA, so children can be born with weakened lungs. And tobacco, again, is a toxic poison, and it takes the minerals out. So mineral deficient can be, yes, because the person's not eating enough minerals, but it can also be that the person's having certain stimulants that are leaching minerals out. We're looking at what damages the DNA. What damages the DNA is chemicals, as the story I related on the thalidomide tragedy. So be careful of the chemicals you're exposed to. Be careful of what you're cleaning the bathroom with, the dishes, washing your clothes with, the fabrics that are touching your skin. In fact, it's in so many areas today, the food that we're eating. And little by little, like the dripping tap on a stone, they're having an effect. The biggest chemical company in the world is the pharmaceutical company. They make billions. And was it Ronald Reagan who passed a law that none of us could sue them? Would you buy a car that there was no ramifications if it fell apart? It's just incredible, isn't it? I wonder if the new government can turn that one around. That'd be a mighty project. Drugs are chemicals, and drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location of, and they certainly have the ability to damage the DNA. Genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods are the result of the DNA of two different species being spliced together. For instance, the DNA of an Atlantic salmon and the DNA of a tomato, splicing together, hoping to be able to create a plant that grows in the snow, but it actually doesn't. But what it does is it changes the whole structure of the tomato. Now you've got a tomato with 5 centers instead of 1. And when the person eats the genetically modified foods, it has the ability to tamper with our DNA. President Vladimir Putin, he passed a law, it was about 15 years ago, that any Russian who grows genetically modified foods or sells genetically modified foods is to be considered a terrorist. He's giving land away to Russians who will grow organic, non-GMO. You look at his spiel on the internet, he says, we Russians look at the West, overfed, over-medicated, over-vaccinated, that's what he says. Sitting down watching boxers every night, and he said, we know it's weakening the West. Is that right? Yep. So go organic again, not just because you're going to get more minerals, but also because it'll help you to be sure that you're not taking in genetically modified foods. Molds. In nature, you'll often see a fungus or a mold splicing into the DNA of trees. In fact, there's even an account of it taking over a snail, and you could tell that it's overtaken the snail because the antennas went longer and psychedelic in colour. Sounds like a science fiction movie, doesn't it? So fungus and mold do have the ability to splice into our DNA. So be careful that there's no molds in your home. In fact, the house should be high and dry. And I am familiar in Florida, because it used to be a swamp, that you have to be particularly careful. So when I was in Eden Valley, I think it was 2 years ago, we had a lady from Florida come. And she told me that she had a lot of sinus problems, a lot of respiratory. And when I looked at her diet, it was a very clean diet. She didn't have any of the usual allergen foods. In fact, I couldn't fault, her lifestyle. And she said sometimes she has sneezing attacks where she just can't stop. And sometimes they've rushed her to hospital. The lady was about 45. So it was a real puzzle to me. I couldn't work out what could this be. And I asked about her house, and she said, I have a beautiful house. There's no trace of mold there. But her kitchen was being renovated while she was at Eden Valley. She was there for 2 weeks, then she was staying with a friend for 2 weeks. And on the second day, the builder sent some photos through. They'd pulled the kitchen apart, and it was lined with black mold. And what they discovered is that the vents under her house had been blocked. So the air wasn't able to move under the house. I don't know building, but so we had the answer to her sinus and her allergy problems, whereas her exposure to black mold. I'm sure it is possible to live a happy, healthy life in Florida, But just be mindful of your house, be mindful of drainage, be mindful of high and dry and keeping, yes, I'm a greenie, I love trees, but they should not be shading the house. And I'm sure in Florida in the summer you don't even want the sun, but the fact is sun does kill mold. So of course it's actually balancing it so that it's not so hot it's burning you and making life unbearable. But I believe every house should have fans. You've got to keep those fans on. Yes, air conditionings can take the moisture out of the home. So it's just being mindful to be living in a home where there's no mold exposure. And I do know that you can get people to come in and test the air in your home to make sure that there is no such there. Electromagnetic field. This is called the silent killer. We are electrical people, so there's a spark of electricity in every cell. So it's the excess and it's also exposure to these electromagnetic fields that are everywhere. So what can we do? What you can do is make sure that it's not on your body. So I was reading the report of a breast surgeon who was alarmed at the amount of young women in their 30s with breast cancer. And he discovered they were getting breast cancer in the breast where they put the mobile phone in the bra. You can even buy a bra, a sports bra today with a pocket in it. Eesh. So be careful on your body's exposure to that electromagnetic field. And men, it's all right to have a man bag, have it away from the body. When you're sleeping, have an electromagnetic field-free bedroom. Have it outside as much as possible. And it's like so many things, little by little, it's eating away at body function. So how can we repair? How can we heal the damaged DNA? Well, you might be surprised and you might not be surprised where I go to the Sustain Me principles. Now, the reason why, no, I'm not writing sushi, I'm writing sunshine. Yes, you live in the land of sun. I'm sure Florida has no lack of sun, but I also know that a lot of people aren't getting out in the sun. And I do recognise that in the middle of summer, it's probably quite uncomfortable to be out in the sun in the middle of the day. But remember, you only need half an hour to get 20,000 international units of vitamin D. And vitamin D is essential because there are 2,500 receptor sites on the DNA for vitamin D. So for our body to function and heal efficiently and effectively, we do need sun. So take time to have little bits out there. If you've got dark skin, you need about 3 or 4 times the sun that I need. And by the way, you can probably bear 3 or 4 times the sun that I can and not get burnt. And you're not far from the sea, and there's a cool breeze coming off that sea, so it makes it a little bit more bearable to have sun aspect. Please, no sunscreens. In Australia, we've got a program called Slip, Slop, Slap. Have you heard of it? It's slang. Slip a top on, slap a hat on, and slop the sunscreen on. But Slip, Slop, Slap has actually created a medical disaster because there are so many people today who are vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D protects the brain against Alzheimer's. That's enough to get out there, isn't it? And vitamin D is essential for the assimilation of calcium into the body. Now, calcium is called the king because when calcium gets in, all the other minerals piggyback on the back. So to get minerals in your body, you need the calcium, and to get the calcium, you need the vitamin D. And to need the vitamin D, you need to have sun. So I laid out in the sun for about half an hour yesterday. It was very, very nice, but I was very, very hot. I had to have a shower. But I didn't use soap because it takes 2 hours for the skin to create the vitamin D. So you can lie out in the sun and you get hot and sweaty, dive in the sea or die in a lake or dive in a pool, and you'll still retain your vitamin D. And before you go to bed at night, you can soap yourself if you need to. The ultraviolet rays from the sun hit the skin. It's the UVB rays that hit the skin. And those UVB rays are blocked by sunscreen. And it's the UVB rays that create they connect with a form of cholesterol just under the skin to create the vitamin D. And if your cholesterol levels are too low, remember they shouldn't go under 200. You probably haven't heard that before. And I'll explain it in more detail tomorrow when we look at heart health. So you need nice cholesterol levels to be able to get your vitamin D. And if you wash your body with soap and lay it in the sun, you won't get any vitamin D. And if you lay it in the sun and get hot and sweaty and go and have a shower and wash yourself with soap, you won't get any vitamin D. There needs to be that nice layer of natural oils on your skin to get the vitamin D. When I go, sometimes Michael and I have a holiday, and I go and lay out in the sun, I don't have sunscreen. I have this round thing on my wrist called watch. 15 minutes front, 15 minutes back under the umbrella. And I know that just suits my skin. If I'm out there for half an hour, I start to get burnt. And the research is showing 6 to 10 sunburns in your lifetime doubles your risk of skin cancer. But you know what they're finding today? Vitamin D deficiency is a big contributing factor to skin cancer. So we need that sun. So even though you live in Florida, don't forget to access the sun. You need it for your DNA. Use of water, every single body function requires water. So make sure you're drinking 8 glasses a day. Go to bed with the glass beside your bed. And here in Florida, I'm sure you perspire more than most, and that perspiration takes out your salt. So make sure you go for the whole salt, a little crystal of salt before every glass of water. Tomorrow, I've got a whole lecture on water and salt, and I'll be defining it there. Sleep, please go to sleep before midnight, those hours before midnight. And tonight, I'm going to show you in detail what happens when we sleep. And I'm going to show you the importance of certain hours and the incredible processes that are happening in our body while we sleep. We need 8 hours, 8 hours a night. And 8 hours a night, one of the hormones that's released while we sleep, especially between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m., melatonin's released. And melatonin is called the fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. We need that melatonin to help with the healing of our DNA. So lack of sleep can inhibit our DNA healing. Trust in God. It's important to thank Him. Trust in divine power. Trust in God that He gave us an incredible body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself, and it will heal itself if you give it the right conditions. And these conditions we are outlining in the Sustain Me principles. Abstain. We've looked at some of the things that must stop for your DNA to heal. The refined sugar, the caffeines. If you're a coffee drinker, don't stop or you won't be able to come to our meetings tomorrow. Start easing off, reduce off it. There's a book, I think his name's Kachansky, it's called Caffeine Blues. And the second title is Wake Up to America's #1 drug. Eesh. Wake up to the dangers. So there are some things that must stop if you want that DNA to heal. Inhale. Inhale means we're getting more oxygen. Inhale through the nose ensures we're getting adequate oxygen. Are you practicing? Hardest time is when you're at the peak of your high intensity, but you get better at it. You can train yourself to only nose breathe. Nutrition. When you look at what the DNA is made up of, It's clear that we need polysaccharides. Polysaccharides is in all your fruits and your veggies, your grains, your legumes. Amino acids, legumes, nuts and seeds are the highest source of amino acids. Minerals, make sure you have a big salad every day. A lot of people aren't used to having a salad every day, but I've got some good news. You'll get used to it. Just have a lovely dressing next to it. When I was in the southern states, I think I was going to Alabama, and the people said, "What will we feed you?" I said, "It's really easy, beans and greens. I love beans and greens." And when you cook the greens, you do not lose your minerals. Only if you throw the water away. You don't lose your minerals when you cook. So make sure you're getting greens every day. Moderation in all the good things. Don't overdo the sun, you'll get burned. Don't overdo the water or you'll have to leave every half hour. So moderation in all the good things. I love my mobile phone. I love WhatsApp because I'm able to have contact with all my family every day, but I'm very cautious about my body's exposure to this electromagnetic field. So moderation in all the good things, moderation in food, don't overdo it. It harms your stomach. Eat most of your food, breakfast and lunch, and then you don't need much at night. Exercise. Exercise increases the circulation of the blood to the DNA, to the very nucleus. And remember what the blood is carrying. The blood is carrying the oxygen. The blood is carrying the nutrients. The blood is carrying the water. The blood takes away waste. We are the ones that choose how much oxygen our blood carries because of the way we breathe. We are the ones that choose the type of nutrients that our blood is carrying because of what we are eating. Hippocrates said, "Let food be your medicine, medicine be your food." The other quote is, "We are made up of what we eat." A lot of people know those sayings, but I wonder if they do when I look at what they eat. Have you looked at some supermarket trolleys? I look in the supermarket trolleys and I think, how will their DNA ever be made? In fact, it's full, but it's all devitalized food. It's called malnutrition B. You've heard of malnutrition A. That's in, the drought-stricken countries in Africa where they just don't have enough food. And yes, malnutrition A. But malnutrition B is alive and well in many developed countries. And in those developed countries, the people are eating huge amounts of food, but there's no nutrition in it. And they're suffering from malnutrition B, but they're huge. How do we know they're suffering from malnutrition B? They've got osteoporosis. The bones are made of minerals. And if you don't have enough minerals, your bones will not be strong. The teeth are falling out. There's some signs of malnutrition B. After 4 weeks, when I had to have my wrist x-rayed, because when the orthopedic surgeon pulled it back into the place and he looked at the x-ray, he said, "Pretty good." Now that told me it wasn't perfect, but I was happy with that. I didn't want pins and plates. I was happy with that. So I went home and I cut half the plaster off because they do 2 plasters now in case you swell. And then I started putting comfrey poultices on every day. And the comfrey poultices, they have a growth stimulant. So at 4 weeks I went back. They wanted to check it because they knew it wasn't a perfect in place. And they looked at the x-ray. They got another doctor. He looked at the x-ray. The nurse looked at the x-ray. Then they looked at me. They were shocked that a 70-year-old woman's bones that had been totally broken and out of place had actually totally healed. Now, why had they totally healed? They totally healed, number one, because I keep the Sustain Me principles. I have nourishing food every day. And I also think that the comfrey helped a bit. But they said, but we still wanted him plaster for 2 weeks. And I accepted that. It's got to keep him mobile. Yeah, well, just to make sure. And as the nurse is putting the plaster on, he said, do you have osteoporosis? I said, no. He said, have you had a test? I said, no. And then I realised how silly that must sound. And he threw his head back and he laughed. He'd never heard anything like it. Here was a woman, a 70-year-old woman, saying she didn't have osteoporosis and she hadn't had a test. He'd never heard the likes. How do I know I haven't got osteoporosis? Well, when I stood on that slippery rock, not knowing it was slippery because nothing else was slippery, but it was a tiny dip and it had had water that had dried. My foot went up, my whole body went up in the air and slammed down on my wrist. I landed, I think my bony hip really banged into it. If I had osteoporosis, I'd have more than a broken wrist. I would have had breakers all over me. And they kept saying, are you sore anywhere else? No, nothing, nothing else. So that's my test. And I also know that because I exercise every day, it keeps the bones strong. And because I drink adequate water, my blood has peak hydration and nutrition, and because I nose breathe, to take to the healing of that bone. And to me, that's the best test. So the body, as you can see, has been designed to heal itself, even down into the DNA. And I'm so glad that though genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. So my father had asthma. He finally conquered it at the age of 50 when he stopped dairy. My baby sister, I used to sit by her bed and read her stories and sing to her when she had severe breathing distress. I remember her little body going up and down, her eyes would get big. She finally conquered asthma at the age of 40 when she totally eliminated all dairy and gluten from her diet, and she learnt about Professor Buteyko's breathing method. The Buteyko method of breathing, Professor Buteyko's dead now, he's a Russian professor, and he developed this method of breathing that raises carbon dioxide levels in the blood, because when carbon dioxide levels rise in the blood, it relaxes smooth muscle and has a bronchodilation effect, opens the bronchs. Isn't that fascinating? It's a way of breathing. She went to classes and learned how to breathe. She only breathed that way when she was having an asthma attack. So my son Peter, imagine my alarm when at 10 months old, I'm doing the pulses and simple treatments I did on all the other 4 children, but he's in severe breathing distress. His nostrils would flare with every breath. From his hips to his neck, his whole body would clench like this at every breath. Very scary seeing your little one like that. So we'd rush him down to hospital. It was an hour away. We're up in the hills. And when I walked in and I saw the doctors' and nurses' faces, I knew that my son was very, very ill. And they would give him Ventolin. Ventolin is a bronchodilator to open the bronchioles. But you know what I noticed? What Peter helped the most was me to just hold him and just keep him very calm. But his little body would thump against me with the breathing. It's very scary. 4 times we ended up taking him to hospital. And then I read in the newspaper that Ventolin reduces lung capacity. The very drug that they give for asthma reduces lung capacity. And I knew that this was beyond me, so I went to a naturopath. Peter turned 40 yesterday. This is when Peter was, well, he was about 14 months when I took him to the naturopath, and he said, this boy's not well. And he asked me about what he eats, and he's just breastfed with a little bit of fruits, that's all. He asked about his birth, and I actually delivered him myself. They thought I had a long time ago and they left me, and baby came, so I delivered him myself. Amazing experience. The nurse came in with a nurse's aide came in with a mop and bucket and saw me sitting there holding my baby's head. Mop and bucket went everywhere. People came flying. But it was an incredible experience. The reason I could do that is because my last 2 births were home births, and I used to watch how the midwife massaged the head out. So he had a very natural birth. So the naturopath was trying to work out why this baby, living in a rainforest, having the best food, great birth, had asthma. And then we realised it was in the genes. My 5th baby, the first 4 not, but this 5th baby. So the naturopath gave me a whole protocol that whenever Peter got a cold, within 24 hours, he'd go into severe breathing distress. So he said, as soon as he gets a cold, don't give him anything to eat but watermelon and breast milk. So how you do that with a 14, 15-month-old is when everyone's eating, you have a kid in the other room reading him stories, and then we clear the table away and save their food, and then that one eats his food out here and another one goes and reads him stories. Do you know, it's great when children aren't used to technology, they love stories, yeah? And that's how we did it. And what I had to do was give him an enema. He said an enema will help him. It'll just release his bowels and it'll take pressure off his lungs. I didn't know that much about natural healing, and it was a lot of work. And how do you give a 14-month-old an enema? I knew I had to distract him. And his elder brother, James, who was about 8, and Peter's 16 months, he had a submarine that had a little motor that had batteries in it, and the propeller went round, and Peter loved it, but Peter was never allowed to touch it. He could only watch. So I said to James, can we actually have the propeller, the motor? And so we gave it to Peter, and Peter's just shocked because he's not allowed to touch this. We've got him lying down. And just as I'm about to put the enema tip in, I nodded to James and we turned the switch and the propeller went round and round. I could have done anything to Peter, anything. Peter's just in 7th heaven watching the propeller go round. So we put the in and let the water, we about a cup of water in and took it out and massaged his little tummy while Peter's just mesmerised by this thing that he usually is not allowed to touch. And after about 10 minutes of me massaging, I just sat him on the pot and we turned the propeller off, and he was happy with that because he couldn't believe that he could even hold it that long. And then everything came away. He opened his bowels and we cleaned him up and we took the little propeller off him and I held him. And what I found was that his breathing distress went from 24 hours to 5 hours just with the enema. Yeah. Do you know, in that little book, The Ministry of Healing, one of my favourite chapters is the physician, the educator. And it says in there on about the 3rd page that the use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many aren't prepared to give. See, that took a lot of effort to do that, but when I compared that to Ventolin, which is going to reduce lung capacity, do you know, it's worth it. And also I was to give him a herb tea that had slippery elm and a little bit of licorice root powder in it, and that helps the lungs. Every time Peter had breathing distress, we did this, and the breathing distress got less and less and less. There was also a herb, it's like a weed growing in our yard. It was plantain, not the banana, but the leaf. And I heard that that was good for the chest, so I made tea with that. And whenever he got a cold, I'd boil it up and put a bit of lemon and honey, and he just drank, got straws that looked fancy, tea parties, anything to get it in. When Peter was 2.5, I went into labour with my 6th baby, and a few hours before I went into labour, Peter got a cold. Then I went into labour, and then what you're challenged with is fear. What if I'm in the middle of labour and Peter has breathing distress and little ones, all they want is their mother when they're sick? Peter never got breathing distress, and Peter never got breathing distress again. And that's how I know that though genetics may load the gun, Peter had a loaded gun. He was diagnosed with severe physiological asthma, and medically, there is no cure. But from the age of 2.5, Peter never got severe breathing distress again. And that is how I learnt what I know today. Yes, I've done a nutrition course. Yes, I've been awarded an associate professor, which is a little bit scary. But really, what I know is what I've experienced, what I've read, and what I've tried and seen that it works. And I'm very happy to share it with you because I've been the mother that has had the sick child and I don't know what to do, but I don't want to give any more drugs. And so that was also my inspiration to write the book, Sustain Me. The book that so many people are pretending to write. But you know, the Bible says you can do nothing against the truth, only for the truth. And we know that eventually they will not prosper, those that have sold the scam books to people here. So now we're going to do some questions. 20-year-old mouldy home, move, had a stroke. Have you ever known of mold toxicity and strokes as symptoms? Yes. Because as you'll see tomorrow, when I look at the heart and I look at what's happening to the blood vessels, mold and yeast in the blood can damage the arterial walls, and then the body sends cholesterol to plug it up. So definitely I have seen a link there. If you have a blood cancer like leukemia or myeloma, would you attack it the same way, a cancer with a tumour? How do you clean out the blood? Absolutely, you do it the same way. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, there's the cancer conquering program, no matter what type of cancer, because you've still got the cells that consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. And chlorophyll, green drinks, that's one of the best blood and tissue cleansers. Do you get yearly lab work or ever go to the doctor preventatively? Never. I found the best prevention is this. In Psalm 55, verse 22, the Bible says, cast your burden upon the Lord and he shall sustain thee. He will never suffer the righteous to. That's my preventative. Do you know, they make a lot of money out of those blood tests. And you know, the blood tests change. I can have not much sleep, get some really bad news, miss breakfast, stressed, constipated, go and have a blood test, going to be terrible. A week later, I've slept well, I had a really good breakfast, I'm drinking adequate water, everything's wonderful, oh, my blood test will look better then. See, blood tests can change. I do acknowledge that in some cases a blood test may be necessary for certain things, but I never have blood tests. What protein powder do you use at the retreat? We use a pea protein powder. I don't know brands in America, brands in Australia. You just read your labels and make sure that there's no nasties in there. Can I make my own with dried peas ground up? No, you can't. Because legumes are indigestible unless they've been well cooked or whether they've been cultured. So you could do a culturing maybe. Thoughts on taking the shingle shot? Please don't, because drugs never cure disease. Do you suggest it be taken for someone who has chickenpox? No, I don't. Is organic groceries really better? They are. I have friends who have organic farms. It costs them a lot of money and hard work to get that organic status. And I had a friend who had an organic herb farm, and she went to we call it the tip, you know, where they dump rubbish, and she found old carpet and she put that between her beds to kill the grass. And then they came with their 6-monthly test of the soil and they found chemicals in the soil and she lost her organic status. So if only they were this strict on conventionally grown fruits and vegetables, they seem to get away with blue murder. But you can believe the organic. Any recommendation for eye melanoma? Yes, I would put castor oil in the eye. And make sure you're having sun. Remember, lack of vitamin D is a contributing factor to melanomas. And did you know that slip, slop, slap does not prevent melanomas? There's no proof that it does. But having adequate vitamin D will help to prevent it. This is a nice one. God bless you. My son asked, Mum, often making cough syrup from Barbara, can I eat onions? Certainly can. 50-year-old mum with protein S deficiency, with history of leg and lung dots in his 30s, now on lifetime blood thinner. Any suggestions? I wouldn't take the blood thinner. I would take cayenne pepper. Now, equal with that would be about 1 capsule 3 times a day of cayenne pepper. Then you can take it in high dose. And then after a week, I'd go to 2 capsules 3 times a day of cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper thins the blood, cayenne pepper opens the blood vessels, and cayenne pepper strengthens the arterial wall. A lot of people don't want to come off that because they're afraid. But you can, there's an ebook called Curing with Cayenne by Sam Biser, Biser. Sam Biser is a medical journalist. When you read his book, you'll be convinced. And Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss, he's got 10 pages to cayenne pepper, half a page to every herb, but 10 pages to cayenne pepper. So reading all that information on cayenne pepper will give this person the confidence that they need to stop the drug and go on the cayenne pepper. I can't tell you what to do, but that's what I would do. Is oregano good to take, and how should it be taken? I don't think you should take oregano oil every day. I think you should keep it for when you need it. Very good for a sore throat. Very good if you've got a cold. And how would you take it? 1 drop in a little bit of water. And after a couple of days, you can build up to 2 drops. It's antifungal, so someone might take it as part of the program to get fungus out of their body. You said you eat avocados, maybe 3 a day. My question is, where do you buy your avocados? You'll have to ask Jacqueline. What do you recommend for soon to be 1-year-old to drink? Doctors, pediatricians are telling me cow's milk is vital. My children never saw a pediatrician. Why? Why do you need to see a pediatrician? You know, your body and that little body has the ability to heal and heal well. Cow's milk is very good for baby calves, but there's no need for children to have it. And if you do want your little one to have cow's milk, it has to be raw organic if you can get it. But I never gave it to my babies. Do you have any natural remedies for gallstones? I do. I want to go back to that question because it was, what should a 1-year-old drink? The best thing is water, but also a 1-year-old wouldn't have all their teeth, so they should still be having some milk. So if they're not breastfed, the next best thing is goat's milk. A baby goat is very similar in size to a baby human, so goat's milk is very similar to human milk. So babies should be having milk until all their teeth, or at least their main molars, are through. Gallstones, I do have a remedy for gallstones, and it's in both my books. It's a gall liver cleanse, and it goes over 5 days. So Self-Heal by Design and Sustain Me both have chapters on the liver where it includes the cleanses. How to reboot your adrenal gland. Well, it's very important that the adrenal glands aren't drained anymore. And refined sugar, alcohol, cigarettes and caffeine are big drainers of the adrenal glands because they use a nervous energy, that lift that people get from having those things. It comes from the adrenal glands. Also, what's that saying? Burning the candle at both ends. So many people turn nighttime into day. It's important to go to bed early so that, and tonight I'll show you all the processes that are happening while we sleep, especially that melatonin that's released between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. Those hours are vital for the recharging of your adrenal glands. And really, the Sustain Me principles will revive adrenal glands. Also, assess stress in your life. We should not have great stress. And what I love about knowing God is He is a solution God. And God's given us one day at a time. Just love today and do your best today. And remember, you have no say over what people say to you or do to you, but you have total say over what you do with it. You don't have to take it on. Do you something to street from... I'm finding it a bit hard to read this writing. What would be your top 3 fabrics? Fibers, proteins, and fat. What would be the top 3 fibers? I thought it meant fabrics, fibers, not fiber from fabric. Top 3 fibers, really all your fruits and vegetables are the best fibers. And proteins, your legumes, nuts and seeds. Fats, coconut oil, olive oil. Personally, I prefer the taste of olive oil. And your nuts and your seeds. Any other? Do you wash your hair daily? No, I don't, because that would really dry my hair out. I usually wash it twice a week. Okay, can I move in with you? You'll have to ask my husband. What do you think about taking colostrum? Colostrum is vital for the newborn baby from the mother. But I don't agree with taking colostrum from the cow, and I know you can get colostrum supplements. You'd have to know that that cow was organic, that cow, yeah, I don't see a need at all. Where do you apply the yam cream? It's usually the inside of arms one time, inside of thighs another time, abdomen another time, chest another time. So you alternate the sites of application. How men use the yam cream. Men apply it twice a day with no break, whereas women apply it twice a day and have 1 week where they break, because women are cyclic, men are not cyclic. What do you think about quinoa? Quinoa is a great grain, but quinoa must be rinsed about 6 times before you cook it. And what that rinsing does is that gets rid of the lectins. If you cook quinoa, it'll have a bitter taste. That's the lectins. But you rinse and rinse and rinse, it disarms the lectins. Is it a better option than rice or potatoes? What about sweet potatoes? Rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, quinoa, they're all great. As I said, potatoes aren't bad. I love potatoes. But it's only when all the carbs are put together you get a problem. And rice is great. You just don't eat huge amounts. How can we do HIIT if we have bad knees? Swimming, you can do HIIT swimming by laps of the pool. You exercise bike. For some knees, an exercise bike is great because all your weight's on your hips. But if your knees don't like the exercise bike, don't do it. You've got to listen to the knees. Rowing machines are great. You can go and find a personal trainer and say, can you tell me what to do? Because I got sore knees, and they'll show you a whole group. Pilates exercises are great, and you haven't got weight on your knees there. How should a breastfeeding mother nourish herself with exactly what we're talking about? And this is what I I was pregnant or breastfeeding non-stop for 14 years. So I breastfed 3 months into every pregnancy, and I didn't lose my teeth or my hair. Mind you, my hair's not as thick as it was before I had babies, but I've still got all my hair. High fiber, generous protein, great fats, a nourishing diet. Could you please discuss potential causes of dark circles under the eyes? Dark circles under the eyes can be a few things. Sometimes it's dehydration. It can be an indication that the kidneys aren't very happy. So one would have a look at how you're drinking, what you're drinking, how often you're drinking. And also it can be a sign of an allergy. So I'd stop the allergen foods. Also important to make sure you're getting adequate sleep and also exercise. So you'd implement all of these things and there should be improvement. Does a vibration machine work for lymphatic drainage? Nowhere near what the rebounding does. It's, in fact, yes, it does have an effect, but it doesn't have an effect on the lymphatic system like the rebounder. Kidney stones, how can you get rid of them? How can you prevent them? Anemia, kidney disease, stones are constant. In my book, Sustain Me, there's a chapter on kidneys, and there's a recipe of a certain herb that can dissolve kidney stones. It's called juniper berries. And there's a 1 month program to help dissolve the kidney stones. And if after 1 month you think they might be still there, have a month break and do the program again. What about green tea? Doesn't that caffeine have the same effect on the cells? Is the issue coffee or is it caffeine? It is certainly caffeine. Green tea does have caffeine and it has tannin. It doesn't have as much as coffee, but we had a lady attend our program who had 4 green teas a day and she couldn't get out of bed the first day. She suffered badly. She got major withdrawals. And after the 3rd day, when she was feeling great, she said, I'm angry. I only started green tea because they said it was a health food and it was high in antioxidants. Well, it still has caffeine and tannin, which are addictive. What are your thoughts on drinking alkaline water? I think alkaline water is a great water, but I don't think it's worth the price of the machine. I think you're better to save your money and go to Eden Valley for a week. It is important to have good water, and the reverse osmosis can do that. Squeeze of lemon in your water will help to alkalize it. What helps cellulite is exercise and keeping well hydrated and keeping chemicals out of your life. So there's a whole lot of things that contribute to cellulite happening. What is the best way to get rid of swollen lymph nodes? Swollen lymph nodes tell me that the lymph nodes are being challenged. So maybe it's got environmental poison build up in the body, so that's where detoxing can help. And the rebounder, that simple little mini trampoline. Now what I'm doing now, that's the health bounce. So your feet aren't even leaving the mat, that's still having an effect. And I don't do that. I leap on the rebounder. But if I had sore knees or hip, the health bounce is still having an effect. And that's what I would look at. I'd look at why is the lymph node swollen? There's a reason. Menopause, I'm using the wild yam cream. Do you use it for 1 year and stop? After 1 year, you can stop, and if symptoms return, you go back onto it for maybe another 6 months. So it's hard to know. How do you know how long? Your body will tell you, but usually a year is a good amount of time. Usually after a year, the hormones are balanced. Then do you need to start using it again in the future? Maybe, maybe not. Your body will tell you. Severe leg cramps. Leg movement when laying down. When that happens, often it's called restless legs, it's important to work those legs through the day. And that's where rebounding is very good at working the legs. Exercise bikes, very good at working the legs, making sure that you have magnesium. Most people that drink coffee have a deficiency in magnesium because that's one of the minerals that coffee takes out. You can also try a hot Epsom salt bath before you go to bed. Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate. The hot water and the magnesium relax the muscles. You can also buy topical magnesium oil and rub that into the legs before bed. What do you recommend for treatment of acne and keloid scars? Keloid scars can be softened by putting castor oil on them every day. Acne is usually a result of a hormonal imbalance. So balancing the hormones with the wild yam cream. What do you recommend for the treatment of Lyme's disease? There's an excellent book called Healing Lyme's by Stephen Harrod Brunner. And I've met several people who've conquered their Lyme's disease by adhering to his protocol. He uses water therapies, dietary, essential oils. Stephen Harrod Brunner. So I'll write down his name. So Stephen, but if you put Healing Limes in, you'll probably get it. Harrod, and it's a hyphenated name, Harrod Brunner. I was in Eden Valley one year, and a young woman about 33 came up to me and she said, I've got Lyme's, what can I do? I told her about the book. I came a year later and I saw her. She said, thank you so much. I've conquered my Lyme's by adhering to the protocol in that book. Healing Lyme's is the name of the book, Healing Lyme's. You mentioned you don't take vitamins, but vitamin B can be helpful. That said, how do you feel about prenatal vitamins? I didn't take any prenatal vitamins. The best way to get your nutrients is through your food, but it's very important to get top quality food. Sometimes we might advise B vitamins for certain things. B vitamins are your brain vitamins. And B vitamins, as I showed you in the hormone lecture, can help your liver to release excess estrogens out of the body. So there might be a place for it, but I don't take it. Everything works, so I don't. I have type 2 diabetes. How can I get something, the medicine that has helped me lose weight? How can I manage the GLP medicine that has helped me lose weight and blood sugar? See, drugs never cure disease, but what I shared with you this morning, we have seen many people conquer their diabetes by those simple lifestyle changes. There's a nasty drug going around at the moment that's supposed to help lose weight. Yeah, Jacqueline knows the name of it. Nasty, nasty. You just have a good look at the side effects, you wouldn't touch it. And there's no quick fix. What is it? The saying, choose your hard. There we go. It's time for a break, a nice big break.